If you've ever dug into your garden beds and found nothing but dry, lifeless soil, you know the sinking feeling that comes with it. No wriggles, no tunnels, no castings, just stubborn dirt that seems impossible to bring to life. Many gardeners assume their soil is cursed or that the only way forward is to buy worms and toss them in. But here's the truth. Worms aren't something you add, they're something you attract. And once you learn how to create the underground habitat they're searching for, they'll show up on their own and transform your garden from the inside out. This guide will walk you through why worms often avoid certain soils, especially in tough climates like Australia, and how you can use a layered, buried attractant method to draw them in naturally. It's a proven approach that not only brings worms but also improves soil structure, boosts microbial life, and keeps your plants thriving. Earthworms are incredibly sensitive to their environment. They need three basic things to survive and reproduce: constant moisture, a dark and protected space, and a steady supply of decomposing organic matter. In many gardens, especially in hot or dry regions, the top layers of soil simply don't provide these conditions. Shallow watering that only dampens the top few centimeters of soil dries out quickly, leaving no safe pathway for worms to travel. Dry mulches such as coarse wood chips or bark keep the surface shaded, but rarely hold moisture long enough to benefit the underground ecosystem. Combine that with soils that are compacted, sandy, or alkaline, and worms have little incentive to move in. The result is a lifeless garden bed where organic matter breaks down slowly, plant roots struggle to penetrate, and moisture evaporates almost as quickly as it's applied. But you can change this by mimicking what happens on a forest floor, where organic material falls, decomposes under layers of soil and litter, and creates the rich underground buffet worms are drawn to. The strategy that finally worked in my own garden wasn't about adding more compost to the surface. It was about building layers beneath the soil where worms naturally want to feed and breed. The buried attractant method creates a moist, food-rich hotspot underground that quickly becomes a magnet for worm activity. Start by digging small pits in your garden bed about 10 to 15 centimeters deep. These don't need to be large, just enough to hold a few handfuls of organic material. Into these pits, add a mix designed to attract worms. Here's the exact formula I've used successfully. So here's what you'll need: 2 parts damp shredded newspaper or cardboard, and make sure it's soaked and wrung out. Then add 2 parts aged compost or well-rotted manure. You'll also want 1 part dried and crushed leaves. Next, dissolve 1 tablespoon of molasses in 1 liter of water. And finally, you can use 1 cup of alfalfa pellets, or if you prefer, 1 cup of diluted alfalfa tea, which you make by steeping a handful of pellets in 2 liters of water for 24 hours. Now just mix these ingredients together until the mixture is moist, but not dripping wet. If it feels a bit dry, go ahead and add an extra splash of that molasses or alfalfa solution. Place this material into the pit, cover it with the soil you removed earlier, and then add a layer of mulch on top. For mulch, it's best to use softer, fast-decaying options like grass clippings, shredded leaves, or straw. This buried zone stays protected from evaporation, promotes microbial activity, and creates the exact conditions worms need to move in. Once you've set up your attractant zones, the next critical step is how you water. Quick daily sprays only moisten the surface, which dries within hours in warm weather. Worms won't risk traveling through such hostile ground. Instead, switch to deep watering once or twice a week. Use a slow trickle or a soaker hose for 20 to 30 minutes to ensure water reaches at least 10 centimeters below the surface, ideally more. This depth is where your attractant zones are buried, and keeping them moist is the difference between worms thriving or leaving. A mulch layer over the top will help lock in that moisture for days rather than hours. If you want to be certain, invest in a simple moisture meter. Testing your soil after watering lets you confirm that moisture is penetrating to the level where worms are feeding. Once you establish a rhythm of deep watering and mulching, the underground environment becomes stable enough for worms to stay permanently. The first sign of success isn't always the worms themselves. Instead, you'll notice the soil darkening and becoming softer to dig. Organic material will break down more quickly, and the surface will remain cool and damp, even after several days without water. When you begin seeing worm castings, small, dark, crumbly pellets of soil, near the bases of your plants, you know the worms have moved in and are already improving your soil structure. Over time, plant roots will stretch deeper rather than spreading out at the surface, which is honestly a direct sign that the soil is holding more moisture and oxygen. This creates healthier, more resilient crops that, really thrive even in dry conditions. Mulch plays a vital role in keeping your soil worm-friendly. Coarse wood chips and bark, while they might suppress weeds, honestly don't provide much food for soil life and tend to dry out too quickly. Instead, it's best to opt for mulches that both hold moisture and decompose steadily. Grass clippings, composted leaves, straw, or even a mix of shredded cardboard with garden trimmings work far better. If your mulch crunches when you press it or remains dry even after watering, it's not doing the job. A good mulch should feel damp and pliable, helping to lock in moisture and feeding the microbes that worms rely on. So, the most powerful change that happens once worms return is that your soil actually starts to regenerate itself. By feeding on organic matter, worms digest and then excrete these nutrient-rich castings that, really improve both fertility and structure. Their tunnels create natural irrigation channels that let water soak deep, and their presence boosts microbial populations that break down material even faster. Within weeks, your soil shifts from lifeless dirt to a living, breathing system. Instead of constantly adding fertilizers and amendments, you'll find your garden maintaining itself. That's the difference between gardening soil and building it. Worms aren't bought, they're attracted. By creating buried food zones, watering deeply, and choosing the right mulches, you can build the underground environment they've been waiting for. Even in the toughest soils, it's possible to transform dead beds into thriving ecosystems full of life. If you found this guide valuable, make sure to subscribe to Soil and Crop Central and share it with a fellow gardener who's struggling with wormless soil. Your garden can go from barren to teeming with life. You just have to dig a little deeper, literally and figuratively.